All right, all right, all right. Welcome to Anon Radio Live. This is your host, Sincere, with the All Rights Matter show. And we have a very, very significant special show for you today. We're going to be talking with Miss Renee Felton, who is Kwadir Felton's mother. Kwadir Felton was shot and blinded by the Jersey City Police Department in the state of New Jersey. And and he still sits in prison to this day. Thank God he was not actually, killed, as we know is, what's happening with most of these young men out here, unarmed men that are being shot by police officers. So he still sits in prison today, never had a record, a really good guy. So I want to go ahead and bring his mother on the line now. Miss Renee, are you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, how are you this evening, Miss Renee?
I'm fine. And you, yourself?
I'm doing okay. I'm happy we were able to finally go ahead and get this together. I know how much this actually means, to you. I know how much this means to Kwadir, obviously, that we get this story out there. And, I just want to know, how you're feeling, how you've been holding up. We've been talking a little bit here recently. If you can just let our listeners know, how have you been holding up through this whole process?
Well, I'm staying strong. I'm holding up because I have to stay strong for Kwadir. Because when I speak with him, he always asks me, "How are you doing, Ma? Are you okay?" And I'm doing fine. And, I have to keep myself going to keep him going. Because if I tell him I'm not feeling well, then he gets like very upset. So, I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there and I'm doing fine.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're actually doing fine. I know we spoke a year ago, actually, and I've kept in contact with you since then. You came on another show that I was a co-host on, Keeping It 100, and you were able to tell us Kwadir's story. So what I'd like to do today is kind of go through the same thing here on the All Rights Matter show, where I'm actually the host of the show. So I want you to give our listeners the opportunity to hear the corruption that's happened to Kwadir, your son, and how that's affected your life and affected your family, your household, and even Kwadir's, siblings as well, how it's affected them. So there's a lot that we're going to have to discuss tonight, and we've already talked and went over some points of the things that we're going to key in on. I just, before we get started, actually, let me do this. Before we get started, is there anything that you would like to say on behalf of Kwadir or anything like that?
Yes, I would. I would just like for all the listeners and everybody to continue to pray for Kwadir. And we have to help him. He needs help so bad. He needs to get out of the prison. He needs medical attention. He needs his eyes checked. It's so many different things that, I would like for the world to know, about what's going on, with Kwadir.
Okay, so let's go ahead and give our listeners a brief overview as far as a rundown from the beginning to the end, and then we'll go into some of the more intricate details of this very long case. In what year and month was Kwadir originally approached by the Jersey City Police Department?
On January 10th, 2010.
Okay, so we're talking about 6 years ago, January 10th, 2010. Let's set that date in your mind for the listeners out there, January 10th, 2010. Now, on that date that he was approached by the Jersey City Police Department. I believe the officer's name is Thomas McVicar. On the date that he was approached by Thomas McVicar, can you walk us through what happened and how that scenario came about?
Okay. Well, on January 10th, 2010, he came from a baby shower, and then he went up to on Bergen Avenue. Then he came back down the White Street. Then he came back down to Dwight Street, and he said he was walking, and he heard somebody call his name. So he said he didn't even stop. He just slowed down, and he looked around, and he looked to one side, and he said it was an empty lot. Then he seen a red truck. So he was he was coming up to the red truck, and he says he said, "Who that? Who that?" And he says to Kwadir, "You little black motherfucker, you better get the fuck down before I blow your fucking head off." And Kwadir kept saying, "Who that? Who that?" So Kwadir said he couldn't see through the back window and the back side windows. He couldn't see through it because the tents were very dark. So he was walking up, going to the driver's side to see who was that in the car. He thought maybe somebody was playing with him, and he said as soon as he got to the window, it just said "bow," and he shot him in the head.
And what window was that? Was that the passenger side or the driver's side?
The driver's side.
Okay, so Kwadir walked around to the driver's side.
Yes.
And he was shot through the window in the head.
Yes.
Okay, and this was on January 10th, 2010.
Right, correct.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay, so he's walking along. He's just minding his own business. He's a free man, minding his own business, coming from a baby shower, with some friends and stuff like that. Coming home, and car pulls up beside him with tinted windows and hurls out some.
Excuse me, Sherrod. The car was parked. The truck was parked.
Oh, okay. It was parked.
Yes, it was parked.
Absolutely. Okay. So he's just walking down the street, and then parked vehicles sitting there with tinted windows, somebody sitting inside, which was Officer McVicar, hurls out some insults. And then Kwadir comes to check out, hey, who is this? Like, who's this talking crazy like this? And immediately once he approaches the driver's side, he's shot.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, after he was shot, let us know what happened directly after that. I mean, were the police called right away? I mean, because obviously the officer just discharged his weapon. So did he call for backup? Did other cars arrive to the scene right away? I mean, what happened, next after this police officer, just shot Kwadir for obviously no reason?
Well, after Kwadir was shot, he called on the radio to supposedly the officers, they were supposed to be out on surveillance. He supposedly called these other officers and directed them to a different location. He said that there was shots. He heard shots fired on Carteret in Ocean. And they went there and they spent 20 minutes or so, just searching around looking, and there was actually no shots fired. And then he called the paramedics, and
McVicar himself called the paramedics?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I hear Mr. Felton there, and good evening, Mr. Felton. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing today?
Okay, sir. I'm doing well, sir. I know that you're kind of in and out, and you have a few things going on. So we appreciate you being in the background too during this call as well, and our prayers and hearts go out to you too as well, sir.
Yes, likewise.
All right, thank you. Um, so let's Miss Felton.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, now so he calls directly after he shoots Kwadir. He calls to fellow officers, and he himself calls the paramedics.
Correct. Can
Okay,
I?
now
Uh,
let me ask you this one thing first.
okay.
When you
Okay.
say calls, do you mean that he called over his police dispatcher radio, or did he call over a work phone or a personal cell phone? How did he call?
I believe he called from. I know he called the other officers on his cell phone.
Okay.
He directed the other officers on the cell phone, and then he called another officer and said that it was shots fired on Dwight Street because Quadir was shot on Dwight Street.
Okay. Okay, so he places a call on his personal cell. He says shots are fired. He calls a couple officers.
Yes.
Um, is there? I don't know. If you know this or not. Is there a reason why he didn't use his police radio, or if he was on duty that night, supposedly on duty that night, why wouldn't he radio fellow officers that were on a possible stakeout or so with him?
I asked that same question. He wasn't on duty. That was the problem. He was not on duty that night.
Okay, so he wasn't on duty that night, and I think that's kind of what I was also alluding to. There a little bit is the fact that an officer that's on duty is going to use the tools that are given to him by the police department. Um, if you're on duty and you're on a stakeout position or anything like that, of course you have your radio to radio fellow officers. It's a required, part of the job. So I think it's very important for us to note that Officer Thomas McVicar did not use a police radio when he called his higher ups, and when he called also for backup. He used his personal cell phone. And the vehicle that he was sitting in, that was not a police issued vehicle, was it?
No.
Okay, so he was sitting in a personal vehicle.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we have a personal vehicle. He's using his personal cell phone to say to call to report a shooting, and he sends the officers to the wrong address. Am I
Yes.
okay?
Correct.
Just want to make sure I'm correct so far. Okay. Now, we like I said, we spoke about this before. Once the officers actually arrived on scene, can you break it down for us? What happened from that point, from him calling out to have these officers scramble and go to the wrong address, even though he knows exactly where he's at because he was parked there?
Okay. Um, well, stating that I wasn't there when it happened is that it was a witness that we had.
Okay.
He basically seen everything, and about a couple of days after I went to speak with him, and me, Quadia, no, it was me and Latreia, his sister. We went to speak with him, and he told us a lot of things, that went on. How he said after Quadia was shot, uh, he said he seen two officers get out the car, but then when we got on the stand, it was something different. But he said that when after Quadia was shot, he said the officers, the cops and stuff started coming, but he said it was the scene was so quiet. There was no flashing lights, there were no sirens, there were nothing. Everything was just quiet, like they wanted it to be like a
Hush,
hush hush.
hush.
Right. They didn't want. He said they were making everybody go back in their houses, like he said they was doing so much things that was not right.
Yeah.
And
So
from, go
so
ahead.
it took about 20 minutes for any backup or for anyone to arrive to that scene. 20 minutes after that gunshot hit Quadir. Within that time frame, what happened in that time frame? And I know what happened. I want you to tell our viewers, Officer Thomas McVicar's reasons for shooting Quadir and what the reality of the situation really is.
Okay.
What was his reason for saying that he shot Quadir? And then I'd like for you to let the listeners and viewers know, what did he do within those 20 minutes while he sent people to another address?
Well, from the witness that we had, he told me that Tom was throwing up. He got out the car. He started throwing up. Then he started kicking Quadir's leg, his left leg, and then Quadir sat up. And then when he seen Quadir set up, sat up. He pushed Quadir down and started searching his pockets, like going through everything. And I guess he figured, oh, he didn't have a gun. So, that's mainly, what I was
And
told, and, what happened
and
that I know of.
when he figured out he didn't have a gun on him, obviously it sounds like Thomas McVicar, he you know he jumped way too quick, in which we see a lot of these police officers do. They jump to conclusions too quick. They see a large black man and they immediately assume that he's violent or that he's dangerous. And Kwadir, I think it's important for us to note, Kwadir has never been in trouble with law enforcement. He's never done anything wrong to deserve being shot or going to jail, because he's never even seen the inside of a jail until this incident. So I want our listeners to know that Kwadir Felton is a very, very upstanding, good young man that, these are a set of extraordinary circumstances that have happened to him. And he comes from a very solidified, good home. Father is a hard worker. Mother is staying on top of the situation day and night. Brother is in the military, got a sister as well. So, it's not like that, Kwadir was out here just running the streets, in and out of jail every other week. He's not one of those kinds of guys. Not at all. He doesn't come from that environment. He wasn't raised that way, and that's not who he was. So it's very important that we note that. Now, let's go along here and say this. So McVicar realized, okay, I've searched his pockets. I've taken everything out. Now, the bullet that he just shot Kwadir with, it went in the left side of his head?
No, it went in
The right.
the right side.
Okay, so it went in the right side. It came out of the left side, but it went through the hoodie. It went through the hat, but it never came out the other side of the hoodie and the hat. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the bullet was possibly still on scene at that time.
Yes, but
Okay.
they said that they never retrieved the bullet.
So they say they never retrieved the bullet. Okay. Now, obviously, when he goes through Quadir's, pockets and realizes, hey, wait, there's no gun here. This guy's unarmed. I just shot him. I have to come up with some kind of an alibi. So I'm guessing that's why he bought those 20 minutes by sending the people to a different location. What do you think? Not what do you think? What alibi did he come up with since he realized that Kwadir didn't have a gun on him?
Oh, okay. He says that Kwadir was walking down the street Kwadir heard devices drop in the car. So that got Quadir's attention to come towards the car. But he said that when he turned around, he seen Kwadir. When he turned around, he was in the back of the truck. He said he was leaning his back up against the window towards the curb where Kwadir was walking. He said that when he turned around, he seen Kwadir at the window with the gun in his hand. Then he said he looked around. Kwadir was gone. He went around the car. He glocked the gun, like I guess how you put a gun in the chambers. A bullet in the chambers.
Yeah.
He said, and then he came back, and Kwadir was standing there with the gun in his hand, and he said the officer said he closed his eyes and saying, "Oh, I wish he'd go away. I wish he'd go away," and his life was threatening. So that's why he shot Kwadir.
But if Quadir's face, how did he get shot in the side of his teeth?
Yeah. Good.
And if Kwadir was looking in the car, faced him, how he get shot in the temple? If he would have been facing him, he should have got shot in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what I understand is he shot through the glass.
No, the window was down.
Okay, the window was already down. Okay, great. I'm glad we could clear that up. Okay. So, the rest of the windows are tinted. Kwadir's walking really towards the driver's side window when he's shot in the side of the head. The officer's story is Kwadir arrives, he has a gun, pretty much looking menacing, and, he felt threatened by Kwadir's presence, and he felt like Kwadir was going to do something to him with this this gun that he supposedly had. So he shot him as he was looking at him, walking, they were face to face pretty much. And which is, we know that's bogus. Like you said, he would have been shot in the face. It wouldn't have went in the right side, the top right side of his head, and come out of the left side. So that would have been an impossible shot. Bullets don't turn. They only go one direction and straight. So we know that he's obviously lying there. Let's keep going, because I know that it gets a lot worse from there. And that's where I'm kind of leading to now. So he figures out Kwadir doesn't have a gun. Kwadir is shot. He's laying on the ground. There's blood everywhere. There's blood all over Kwadir's belongings, his cell phone, his keys, on the clothing, all the clothing that he's wearing, and it's because of the severity of the gunshot wound to the head. And so there's a lot of blood all over the scene, all over the location. So now he can't find a gun on Kwadir. So what does he do to trump up the scene to make it look like Kwadir was a criminal?
What they did was after he was shot, they took him to the hospital. They placed him. He was after we got there. We was talking to the homicide.
Okay.
And they told me we kept asking, like, who shot him? Me and his sister, we kept asking, well, who shot him? Who shot him? And it took them a while to let us know that he was shot by a Jersey City police officer. And I said, so what happened? And they couldn't even tell us what happened. The story came out 2 days after the story came out on January 12th about what I just told you about Thomas McVicar, what his story was.
What his story was.
And then I don't know.
And in Thomas McVicar's story, what did he say about Kwadir Felton as far as, in that story that was released? Did he say that Kwadir had a gun on him?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and that's what I've been alluding to, is where did the gun come from that was supposedly found on Kwadir? Because he emptied his pockets and he didn't find a gun. There was blood all over all of Kwadir's belongings. So that means his DNA is all over everything because of the severity of his gunshot wound. So when the story came out 2 days later that Kwadir was shot, and the reason why he was shot is because I guess the officer felt threatened because Kwadir had a gun. Where did that gun come from?
Sherrod, to all the listeners out there, as Kwadir was in the hospital, Kwadir's somewhat called friends came up to the hospital, and one of the friends came up there with a gun and bullets in his pocket. None of the other guys that was in the car knew he had the gun on him. And when the police asked them how did they get up there so quick, they began to search them. And as they searched them, they found the bullets in one of the guys' pockets. So that led them to look for car keys from one of the individuals. When they found the car keys, they went outside and they went to the car and they looked in the car and they seen the gun laying on the back floor, and they retrieved the gun. And momentarily, after them retrieving the gun and arresting them that came up to the hospital in the car, they took the gun up to the scene of the crime where Kwadir got shot and put it on the ground after his body was left from the scene of the crime, and took photographs of it and said that was the gun that he had.
So, let's just recap, for any of our listeners that are out there that are maybe just tuning in just now. On January 10th, Kwadir was, stopped pretty much as he was walking by Jersey City Police Department Sergeant, I believe he is, Thomas McVicar. McVicar was parked on the side of a road in a tinted personal vehicle, and he hurled out some obscenities to Kwadir. Kwadir approached the driver's side window to see who was talking to him in that fashion. When he approached the window, he was immediately shot in the head. As he lay there bleeding out, paramedics and other officers were called by Thomas McVicar to go to another scene, therefore delaying the time that it took to be able to take care of Kwadir. So he could have died within that time frame from bleeding out from the severity of the gunshot wound. And when they took Kwadir to the actual hospital and they got the weapon from some of the guys that had came up there to the hospital, they took that weapon, put it back on the scene, and then charged Kwadir with that gun.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now this is all, we're talking about January 10th, 2010. Now, as a matter of fact, let's go a little bit further before I go there. So as he's sitting in a hospital, did he call these friends to come up there, or were they just coming up there on their own accord?
They were coming up there on their own accord because he was shot in the head, and supposedly they was concerned about who had shot him. And my perspective on how the gun got up there to the hospital, cause who in their right mind would bring a gun to the hospital where there is plenty police and somewhat your friend has supposed to be just got shot. So make a long story short, Thomas McVicar somehow told that person who had that gun to bring it up there to the hospital so that way they can have a gun to put on Kwadir Felton, because he did not have a gun to supposedly threaten Thomas McVicar with or use on him at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we know, and I thank you for that, Mr. Felton, we know by um, we know by the cases that have happened all across America, day in and day out for decades now, that police officers have planted evidence, that they've been corrupt in the way that they deal with folks in the community, by bribing people. We know all of these things to be true. And, just to drive home the point of what you were saying saying even more so, is, not only did these gentlemen come up there, Kwadir's so-called friends, but at the same time, later on, we're going to talk about February's incident. Later on, everybody that was implicated around Kwadir on the later incident, they were all pretty much released and they're all back home now.
True.
And Kwadir is the only one facing the amount of time that he's facing.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, let's go forward a little bit. Now, Kwadir's in the hospital. Obviously you guys have been alerted, going up there. Miss Felton, what happens when you go to the hospital? What do they say? Do they allow you to see Kwadir right away? What happens?
I was not allowed to see him. I didn't see Kwadir until we bailed him out. No, matter of fact, I did get special permission. Matter of fact, on the second, let me see, first, 10th, 11th, 12th. On the second day, I had to wait because they already had him in police custody. So they had a reverend called, he knew the warden of the jail. So the warden had came and escorted me up to see Kwadir. But Kwadir was so heavily sedated, he didn't even know that I was there.
Okay.
And then after that, I didn't get to see him no more until he was in the county jail.
So you really didn't even get a chance to talk to him?
No.
Okay. And how long from the time that he got shot in the head, the bullet, tragic incident, the bullet that struck him has permanently blinded him for life now. How long after he was shot with this tremendous injury did they transfer him to the county jail?
3 days.
So on the 10th he was shot, and on the 13th he was transferred.
He was transferred to East Orange General Hospital. When we went there looking for him that same day, and then that night he was transferred to the county jail without a discharge by a doctor. They just took him out. They just took him out the hospital.
Okay.
Took him out ICU.
Wow. And that goes to show, right there is where we see that the welfare of the patient did not capitalize on it wasn't more important than the fact that they wanted Kwadir behind bars, because they were already in the processes of covering up what they know they did wrong.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Okay. So, excuse me. Kwadir goes directly to jail from that transfer. Now, at what point in time, on what day were you guys able to bail him out?
We got to bail him out on February 11th, 2010.
Okay, so we're talking roughly 1 month after the initial incident. Kwadir was bailed out, and he was coming home.
Yes.
To obviously to await his trial date.
Yes.
Okay. And his charges at the time that he was bailed out, what was his charges, his initial charges from that run-in with Officer Thomas McVicar?
It was aggravated assault. It was possession of a weapon. That's mainly aggravated assault, possession of a weapon, and that was it. It was so the charges changed so many times.
All right, well, and I'm sure they did because that's what police officers and police departments do when they're in the wrong. They try to change the narrative of the story to fit the outcome that they're looking for. And in most of the times, that outcome is to make sure that no officer goes to jail and that they're justified in everything that they do, whether it's unlawful or not. Okay. So McVicar here, I'm actually reading over some of these notes here. Now McVicar, actually, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We spoke and we have about, oh God, it's just so much that they did wrong. So I have about, for my listeners that are out there, I have roughly a little bit over 10 pages of notes here. Okay, guys, so 10 pages of notes. Now, that's how much corruption is in the Jersey City Police Department. Officer Thomas McVicar is not the only officer that is being implicated in this corruption, but because he is the one that shot Kwadir, placed the gun beside his body, a gun that Kwadir has never owned, and has done these things. That's why we are keying in on Officer Thomas McVicar at this time. Now, it goes a lot higher than this, guys. And let me just read to you like one of my notes here. Thomas McVicar was also working with federal authorities under Operation Wetlands. And we're about to actually get into that in 1 second here, but you have to understand why these entities protect each other. So McVicar committed this horrendous crime on a citizen that's never been in trouble, never was on no police radar whatsoever, was not under any kind of investigation whatsoever. He commits this crime while he's in his personal vehicle, with his personal weapon, because he wasn't on duty, and this is just allowed to fly because he was working with federal authorities in a drug sweep program as well. So we're going to get to that in a second. Now, what's very key for anyone listening out there to know is this. On January 10th, when Kwadir had his initial run-in with Thomas McVicar, there was nothing discussed about drugs. There was nothing discussed about any kind of gangs or any talk, anything like that. There was nothing discussed about any kind of a street life, nothing like that. Okay? So the charges that were brought were assault on a police officer and, weapons charges. So that was the scope of what happened from January 10th up until the day that he was bailed out on February 11th of 2010. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Felton, when Kwadir came home on February 11th, tell us what happened from that point forward.
Okay, we got him out on February 11th. Of course, we took him to the doctors and, had him checked out and everything. And then that's when we were having community meetings with Reverend Daughtry. We was having community meetings every week, once a week. And we went to a community meeting on that Wednesday. That was February. We had them every Thursday.
Okay.
And on February 18th, do you want to go that far? You want me? February?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay. On February 18th, 5:30 in the morning, they come banging on the door. Now, mind you, Kwadir was blind already. He was already shot in the head. They come banging on the door saying they had a warrant for Kwadir's arrest for conspiracy. He pulled out a piece of paper. He put it in my hands, and then he snatched it back out my hands and put it back in his pocket, which I knew it wasn't a warrant. But they took him. And when they took him, they took him back to the precinct, fingerprinted, did everything all over again, and they put him back in the county jail. and they gave him a bail of $125,000.
Okay. So on February 11th, how much was his bail on February 11th?
It was $200,000.
Okay, so on February 11th, you had to put up a bail of $200,000 to bring Kwadir home so he can wait for his trial. 7 days later, on February 18th, they come banging on the door with a brand new charge of conspiracy with a $125,000 bail in addition to the $200,000 bail that you had already just paid.
Correct.
Okay. Now, the conspiracy charge, what was that about? Was that a conspiracy to do what?
Conspiracy to distribute controlled dangerous substances.
Okay, so we're talking about a conspiracy drug charge. Now,
Yeah.
let's go over this again. I want the listeners to be very clear on what we're talking about here. We're talking about a young man who on January 10th of 2010, as of that date, he had never been in trouble with law enforcement. He had never been under investigation. He had never been on anyone's radar for doing anything wrong. Okay? Now, that's all as of January 10th of 2010. He's pretty much a very good person in the community, that's a regular guy that's doing what he's supposed to do and not doing anything wrong. Now, after they realized that they messed up when they shot him, when Officer Thomas McVicar shot him, he realizes he messed up. They planted the fake evidence. I'm sure they weren't expecting Kwadir to bail out. He actually bailed out, and they had to figure out a way to cover their tracks again. So 1 week after him bailing out for an assault and weapons charge, which were bogus charges, 1 week to the date of him bailing out, they went back to Kwadir's house to terrorize him even more, to pull him out of his bed, to arrest him for conspiracy charges on a drug case. Someone who's never been in trouble, never had a problem with the law, he gets pulled out of his house because of conspiracy charges. Never had drugs found on him. The house was not even searched for drugs, was it?
No.
The house wasn't even searched for drugs. So that goes to show that they weren't looking for drugs. If you get a conspiracy charge with the intentions to distribute, the first thing that they're going to do when they raid your house, I've been in a raid before. Trust me, I know what it feels like. I've been just sitting at a friend's house before, and I've sat through some terrible raid twice. I'm telling you what they do. Everybody is rounded up. Everybody is brought to the side. They're segmented off, and the house is ransacked because they want to back up the charges that they're bringing. They want to be able to say, well, this is the reason why we entered the household with this warrant, because, this person was a drug dealer. So not only did we have conspiracy, but we also found drugs within the house. So they didn't even bother to do that. So they come back a week later. They take Kwadir out with brand new conspiracy charges now, with $125,000 bail. Now, how long did were you guys able to bail him out again after that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So,
2 weeks. He was bailed out on March 3rd, 2010.
Okay. All right. So he sat there for a couple weeks. March 3rd, you guys got him out again. Now, if you can, just give me a brief description of what was Kwadir's state of mind after now going through two traumatic incidents. One of them, in January 10th was the last day that he would officially ever be able to see with the same God-given vision that he was blessed with when he was born. So that's traumatic by itself. Then in February, you know, they're coming to the house to actually extract him on conspiracy charges. A person who's never been in trouble before, just went through a traumatic incident. The family, you know, has just put up a tremendous amount of money. Now they're back to terrorize again. They take him away again on these new trumped up charges. And, you know, he has to get bailed out again, which is more money for the family. When he came back from, you know, jail this time, what was he like? What was the interaction in the household with Kwadir at that time?
He basically he was traumatized because he used to say, "Ma, did you lock all the windows? Is the door locked? Because they're gonna come in here and get me again." He was very traumatized. Yes, he was.
Yeah.
And you know, he was just afraid.
He was weak, couldn't walk.
He was so weak. He couldn't hardly walk. He headaches. He was just traumatized. He was actually scared. Like, "Ma, you locked the windows? Is all the windows locked?" I said, "Yes, Kwadir." He said, "Well," I said, "we on the second floor, so I don't think they can get up there. Get up here." He was just traumatized.
Absolutely. Now, at this time, how old was Kwadir when this happened?
18.
He was 18, so he had just, you know, become that young man, legally become that young man of 18 years old. Okay. You know, the story is just so heavy because, you know, I don't think that a lot of people recognize and understand that there's a lot of good young men that are out here, and young ladies as well, that are doing the right thing, and life hands them a bad deck of cards. And in Kwadir's situation, it handed him almost the worst deck of cards that you could possibly wish to be dealt in life. Someone that's following the rules, someone that's doing what they're supposed to be doing, someone that's you know, leading by example. He has, you know, had great friends that stood by his side, and a great family that supported him, you know, in all of his efforts. But yet his life was completely derailed by a set of circumstances that he had no control over. And I want the listeners and the viewers to understand that. When you hear the propaganda coming out from the police departments, when you hear the initial story, Thomas McVicar was able to narrate the initial story. When the media broke this story, they didn't break this story with the facts. They didn't go from a non-biased angle. They went directly with what the police officers said happened. Okay? So, you know, now in the trial, and this is what we're about to get to now, it came out that the police officer absolutely lied. But not only did the police officer absolutely lie, but his higher-ups and those around him worked very hard to protect and to cover up this egregious crime. So that's kind of what I want to jump to now is, you know, when the trial started, okay, now, Kwadir, you know, let's put this into perspective here. Kwadir has been terrorized by these folks, by the Jersey City Police Department, literally terrorized and you know, pretty much shot almost for dead, but he survived. So now he has to go to court to face these people. And, you know, and to go into a situation where he has a lawyer here, and I'm reading here, her name was, let me see, Brooke, what was Brooke's, Brooke Barnett. Okay. Mm-hmm. That was Kwadir's original lawyer, Brooke Barnett. Now, Brooke Barnett takes Kwadir's case, and, you know, which would seem like a fairly easy case because of these factors. The gun that was found at the scene had no DNA on it, none of Kwadir Felton's DNA. Now remember, this is one of the most bloody gunshot scenes ever. And there was no blood DNA found whatsoever on the gun. There was also no fingerprint evidence that Kwadir had ever touched that gun. There was not a partial print, a palm print. It wasn't on the handle. It wasn't on the nozzle. It wasn't on anywhere that you would think that there would be a fingerprint on a gun. There was nothing linking Kwadir to that gun. Okay? And am I right by that so far?
Yes.
Okay. So, when the story initially came out, that's how McVicar was able to get a foothold. That's how the police department was able to get a foothold in the public's mind, is they were able to say that this gun belonged to Kwadir and that they took a criminal off the streets, a violent criminal off the streets, when in actuality, that gun, in the trial, it came out that Kwadir never owned it, as Mr. Felton also said, never owned it, and since he never owned it, there was no way that he could have ever used it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about Officer Thomas McVicar. Now, I want to go deeper into the story because not only was Kwadir shot and blinded by the police department, not only was he terrorized over a month later and they added conspiracy charges to the initial assault on a police officer and gun charges, but now he has to go to court. He has to face these people. And in facing these people, he has a lawyer, Brooke Barnett, who is supposedly going to help him to get out of this situation. Now, what's one of the first things that she does? Does she offer a plea agreement or a plea deal?
Yes.
Okay, and what was Kwadir's response to this plea agreement?
Kwadir, he said he's not pleading because he's not pleading to something that he did not do.
So he was resolute in how he was standing on this. He was firm. I didn't do this. I'm not going to be tagged with this because I did nothing wrong.
Yep.
Absolutely. As any innocent man should do. There's there's a lot of us, more of us than not, plea because we don't want to face the stiff time. Even if we have been wrong in a situation, allowing them to have the plea bargain or allowing them to get the victory through the plea bargain allows us, who are wrongfully convicted sometimes, to literally go home that same day. And that's what they use as securing that conviction, that plea bargain conviction, is the tactic of, well, if you plead to it, you can go home today. And a lot of people take that plea, or they take that plea, so they won't have to face 4, 5, or 10 years, and maybe they'll only have to do a year or something. So it happens to a lot of us. It happens all the time. But I want to just point out that Kwadir was so resolute in his position. He was so firm in his standing that he would not, he did not even want to subject himself to a plea bargain that Brooke Barnett was offering him.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and prior to the plea bargain, Kwadir was supposed to want to plead out to a year incarceration and that he would still receive money out of his civil lawsuit against the state. But due to the fact that he turned it down, and the lawyer used the family as much as she could to get valid information that we gave to her, she took the information that we gave to her and used it against us, and then they brought her out. So she can get paid. She bargained with the state.
Okay, and that's exactly where we were going, Mr. Felton, is the fact that Brooke was there supposed to do a job to protect Kwadir and to do the best that she can to expose the truth of the situation. Now, going through this whole incident, You know, we've laid out several times what the facts are leading up and have reiterated that. Going through this whole situation, excuse me, I had to get some water. You know, we're about to enter the trial, okay, and you know, we're going to go over a lot of points here for the trial, but before we even do that, this is what I'd like to place in the viewers and the listeners' minds so that they can have the proper picture painted. Now, Kwadir has been shot, he's been blinded, he's been traumatized, he's been re-terrorized. Now he's on trial, and his support system that's supposed to be there is his immediate family and his closest friends and relatives. On the day that Kwadir was supposed to be going on trial, what was going on in that situation? Were they trying to keep you guys out of there, Mr. and Mrs. Felton, out of the courtroom with Kwadir during that time frame? And were they trying to minimize the effects of what Thomas McVicar had done to Kwadir to place him in that situation?
Yes, prior to the trial, 6 months prior to us picking the jury, I was so depressed and so feeling so angry about my son being shot and how his character was so unmanaged with anger about the whole situation. I took a walk one night and I bust a car window and just kept walking. And then prior to us picking the jury, they came the next day and locked me up for something that happened 6 months ago because they said they had my DNA because I punched the window. And I'm supposed to go in a car and take a baseball glove and a pair of nunchucks. Are you serious? I said, okay. So I spent 15 months in the county jail.
You spent 15 months in the county jail for a window,
a
baseball glove, and a pair of nunchucks?
Yeah, that's what they said I was supposed to take out the car. Now, prior to that, my wife and my daughter was supposedly, Brooke Burnett let them know that they wasn't going to be able to go into the courtroom because she was going to use them in Kwadir's trap.
So that's what Brooke Barnett said is you can't come into the courtroom because pretty much I'm going to be putting you on the stand.
Right. And the only one they put on the stand was my daughter, and they didn't do nothing but just characterize her with some dealings about nothing that had to do with Kwadir. And my wife, she didn't never get a chance to go into the courtroom until around about the end of the process of the trial. But what makes things so unbelievable with Brooke Burnett is that the judge that was on trial for Kwadir takes a vacation, and another judge comes in, and instead of her postponing it until the judge that was assigned to the trial, she moves forward with the other judge, and he the one that during the conspiracy of all the individuals that was involved, he was one of the judges to set plea bargains out for them, and he was the one that gets Kwadir sentenced and lose his trial because one or two juries were exposed to one knew police and worked with police, and the other one, she had a granddaughter that knew Kwadir, and she stated that she don't know nothing about Kwadir, and she manipulated the jurors into helping find Kwadir guilty on charges that he never had nothing to do with. All the charges is bogus against him.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? Let's actually back up a few steps and go over a few things.
No,
Another thing that the lawyer Brooke Barnett could have actually done, as far as my understanding of the situation, Thomas McVicar, when he shot Kwadir Felton, according to the Attorney General guidelines, anytime an officer discharges his weapon, he's supposed to file a use of force report and an incident report. There was never a police report filed when Kwadir was shot, and there was never a use of force report filed when Kwadir was shot. So the Attorney General's guidelines were purposely, ignored, and even to the point, I remember speaking to you, Miss Renee, and to the point where Thomas came out on the stand saying that he was told to ignore these guidelines, and that's why he did not file the report. So my thing is, why didn't the lawyer postpone or create a motion to postpone until the use of force report was readily accessible, so that she could properly, defend her client, Kwadir? That to me still makes no sense as far as how this trial was able to move forward without the proper protocol being in place by the police department, and with them getting on the stand and admitting that they didn't follow this protocol.
Yes, because, she went to trial with basically no paperwork. She had no paperwork to prove anything. She just got them on the stand, and she pointed the facts out, but it really didn't do anything because she didn't have no type of proof. She had no paperwork or nothing. But they got on the stand and they did testify. Thomas testified that he never wrote a police report. Matter of fact, there's no reports on January 10th, 2010. Not one single report.
And you know this because you filed the Open Request Act, the Freedom
Yes.
Okay, all right. And they denied that.
Denied it, yes.
Okay.
It's
all right.
saying it was still being investigated. And I asked him, how is it still being investigated? He already done went to trial. He already done been found guilty, convicted, and everything. And y'all still investigating this case?
Yeah, if the conviction has already happened, the investigation is complete.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Now, during this trial, one of the notes that I have here is Detective Velez. Actually, I have a couple notes here. One was Lieutenant Michael Clifford. He testified to actually being called to a separate location by Thomas McVicar that night. Michael Clifford was actually on duty that night, and he was called to a separate location. So he testified that in the trial. And also Detective Velez, she testified in the trial that she was the detective that was the main detective that was out there for the drug sweep, which was the second charge that Kwadir was arrested on in February for, okay? On February 18th, let's be clear, because listen to where we're going. So Detective Velez was, a part of that drugs thing that was going on, that street sweep that was, pretty much initiated by the federal authorities under Operation Wetlands. So she testified on trial that prior to Kwadir being shot on January 10th, that Kwadir was never on the radar of law enforcement when it came to Operation Wetlands and this drug sweep. That Detective Velez had never knew who Kwadir was. She had never heard of his name until that point in time. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right. So what we have here is clearly a lot of tampering went on with this trial and with this case. And the reason why I'm pointing it out, and I'm reading off some of these notes here for the listeners and viewers, is I want you to be able to clearly see the picture that I'm painting here and the picture that we're painting in this interview. Kwadir on January 10th had assault and gun charges. On February 18th, he was arrested on conspiracy. The main detective that was leading that investigation said that he was never even on the radar for the conspiracy charges. He was never even on the radar for the conspiracy charges. Okay? Now, that means that, he wasn't distributing. He was not one of the main distributors or what they tried to paint him out to be. That was not his role, and that was a false narrative that was placed out by the Jersey City Police Department. So the detective undermined that false narrative by stating through the trial that she never even knew who this kid was. She had no idea. Okay?
Correct.
So, moving forward here, let me look at this notes here. Okay. Now, not only do we have McVicar getting on the stand saying he never filed a use of force report, Michael Clifford, Lieutenant Michael Clifford, getting on the stand saying that he was called to a separate location by Thomas McVicar's personal cell phone. But we also have Detective Velez getting on the stand saying she never heard of Kwadir Felton until the day he was shot. Now, we have all of these people. The story is very clear and very easy to say. This is what happens next. Instead of trying Kwadir for the assault and the gun charge that happened on January 10th, trying him for that and then trying him for the conspiracy charge, instead, the prosecution linked both of the cases together that happened a month apart, linked them both together as if they happened together, and tried both of the cases at the same time, as if Kwadir was shot in a drug sting.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so what we have is, Kwadir was not afforded legal due process. He was not afforded, the rights to a fair trial. There was nothing fair about his trial. There is no way that they can lump together two situations that have no correlation. They happen over a month apart from each other, present that to the jury as if it happened as one situation, and that both situations have anything to do with each other. So, yeah. In that essence, that's the anger, I believe, that Mr. Felton was feeling. He knew that his son was being railroaded. And I think that any father that has good sons, especially a son that's in the military, has good sons, would be very angry and upset at a system that is ripping his family apart and ripping the morals, the values, and the principles that he's instilled in his children, ripping that out of them. And, when you have a family that instills respect and honor and pride, that bleeds over into all parts of life. And that means that Kwadir and his brother, they're young African men that, normally before this incident, I'm sure they would probably see a police officer and treat him with respect and with dignity. Okay? With no kind of prejudice treatment or anything like that. But then you get blindsided by an event like this, and as a father, you can't help but to be angry because Kwadir is being thoroughly railroaded, not only from the fact that a gun was planted on him, then more than a month later, conspiracy charges were placed on him. Then when he goes to trial, he has a lawyer that sells him out because the state is paying her more to do that. And then you get painted as some kind of major drug offender when these two cases had nothing to do with each other, and in the process by which he was tried was wrong. So that's the picture that I want to paint for the listeners and for the viewers. You have to understand that these are a set of circumstances that are extraordinary. It's very provable to show that the Felton family is telling the truth. Mr. and Mrs. Felton would not be on the All Rights Matter show on Anon Radio Live with me right now to tell me a bunch of lies about their son. This is something that they're fighting. They've been fighting since day one, and they're going for the appeal. As a matter of fact, the appeal process just got approved. So this is something where a proper lawyer is looking at it now and understanding that there were massive errors that really weren't errors at all made in Kwadir's case that the state did not pick up and that they didn't bother to address. We'll say that. They picked them up. They knew exactly what they were doing, but they purposely didn't bother to address them. And Mr. and Mrs. Felton, I don't know if you mind. Do you mind if I say why? If I give my idea why?
No,
mind.
no, not
Okay.
at all.
Well, the reason why I look at this and I think that they did it this way, there's no use of force report, so it doesn't exist. Technically, as far as statistically speaking, it doesn't exist. The shooting never happened. That also releases them off the hook from the legal obligation of a civil trial. And the way that they were able to solidify that even more was to actually throw this trial and to skew the way that the trial was seen. Now, why did they go through all of this, effort in this one situation when they could have just outed one bad cop and said, let's get rid of this one cop. He did something wrong. Let's, handle this guy in a criminal fashion. Let's handle the family in a civil fashion through the civil rights courts. Through the civil courts. All of these things could have happened in this way, but they didn't happen in that way. So my idea of why this wasn't handled appropriately is it goes back to what I was saying about the federal situation. This was all under a federal operation, guys. You have to understand that. This is all under Operation Wetlands. This is when federal operatives get with state and local law enforcement, and they devise a plan, an operation to be carried out on the American people. Now, am I saying that none of those operations are useful? Yes, they are, especially in the cases where they're looking for sexual offenders and stuff like that, and the sexual traffickers, people like that. In the cases where you have people like Kwadir, these cases are the use of force is not justified, and it's literally a terrorizing tactic to the people that are living in the community. These operations never happen on the higher side of town, on the side of town where the tax code is a lot more. So they pick their neighborhoods where they want to, institute these federal operations in, and then the people that are under the federal operations, they're blanketed, they're protected with the same rights as the federal officers are. Federal people don't go to court. You're not going to get an FBI agent ever going to court getting convicted of a crime. It's not going to happen. The likelihood of that happening is slim to none. Now, when the local and state governments work in, direct affiliation with the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies, they get the same rights. They get the same protection. So they come out into the streets and they act with, it's just lawlessness. They have no kind of care in the world for what they do, because now they're under a federal program working kind of as a federal agent, and they can get away with murder, literally. So instead of them outing Thomas McVicar and saying, okay, let's get him out of there, they realized, wait, he's a part of this federal drug task force. If we out this man right now, all the work that we put in through the rest of the operation will be compromised. And if that work is compromised, everything is lost. We have failed this operation. So instead, they decided to take the gun charge, to lump it up with the conspiracy charge, and then to lump that all together under the federal operation of Operation Wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
And, we haven't said this yet, but according to my notes here, the Attorney General, after Kwadir's conviction, the Attorney General comes out with an article, stating what happened and that they were happy to get a drug dealer off the streets, Kwadir Felton. And you were looking to go to the AG to actually get help, and you had to read this article online.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the federal government handing out passes through the state level down to the local level, and all of these crimes being covered up. Every level of government is implicated in wrongdoing in this situation. Every level of government. I'm talking about, this goes up to the top. There's high state level officials that know about this. It's impossible for Chris Christie not to know about this. He has a very close, personal, deep connections with the Jersey City Police Department. He knows those individuals. So it's impossible for Chris Christie, who was just running for president, to have not known about Kwadir Felton's situation. But this was covered up from the federal level, the state level, and the local level. And we're talking about covered up to the point where a young man is shot in the head. There's no DNA, no blood on the gun. There's not even a gun on the scene when his body was transported to the hospital.
Yep.
And then he's railroaded again a month later, by being raided in his home for trumped up conspiracy charges. And then they lump all of it together and say, you're under Operation Wetlands, the federal operation called Operation Wetlands. And he's all of a sudden becomes the poster child of their major accomplishment, when it's really nothing but one huge cover-up. Now,
100% right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. That's why I asked you. That's my take on it. That's how I look at it, that this is a 100% cover-up, that federal, state, and local authorities are all implicated in this cover-up, and it goes to the top. This is a scandal that Chris Christie knows about. They're talking about some bridge scandal and all this other kind of stuff going on. Well, this is a real-life scandal where a man was shot and blinded by a police officer, and it was covered up because it was under a federal operation. And now, you guys are having problems. Like the other day, you just went up there to the courthouse on the 22nd for some appeal paperwork. And then on the 23rd, you have the Jersey City Police Department at your house. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. About 10 o'clock, between 10:30, the doorbell rang. And I peeked out the window, and I seen it was a Jersey City police officer. So I'm like, what is, what? Okay, so I went to the door, and I opened the door. He says, "Oh, good morning, ma'am. It was a 911 call from this address." I said, no, I didn't call 911. He got on the radio, and I don't know if it was the dispatcher or whoever, and said, I can't remember the name because I was just so shocked. I can't remember the name that he said, and he said 128. He said the address, and I said, don't nobody live here by that name. And he said, oh.
And at the time, was it just you there by yourself? Was Mr. Felton home?
No, I was here by myself.
Okay.
And then he said, well, did upstairs call? I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
and he left. He went, and I think he rang the second floor.
Yeah.
And then when he left, I went upstairs and I asked them. I said, "Did y'all call 911?" They said no.
Okay,
And nobody lives here at that name that he gave me.
now, in my opinion of that situation, when you told me about it, I immediately told you how I felt about it and what to do in case that ever happens again. And I know your daughter spoke to you about that as well.
Yes.
You know, it is just very coincidental that you would go up there on the 22nd for, you know, appeals paperwork, because they obviously know that you're filing this appeal. They know
Yeah.
it's going down. They know it's happening. And a lot of those people are going to be exposed, and a lot of the corruption is going to come out. So the day you're going up there, you're getting some of your appeal paperwork in order. The very next morning, they just show up randomly at your house saying
Yeah.
that there was a 911 call for your house, and there's no 911 call. And the thing that bothers me about it, and I'll say this here on air too, is that you were home by yourself. That they know that, you know, Mr. Felton works and he has to, you know, he has a tough job that he does, but they know that you have a lot more time to work on Kwadir's case, and they don't want you working on his case. Obviously, they do not want the appeal to go through. None of those people want to get back on the stand. They don't want to face a good attorney that's going to do the job right.
Right.
So it makes me nervous knowing that they showed up to your house a day later, you know, for some bogus phone call that was never made from your residence. And that's why I say that, you know, we have to get the information out. Because one thing that the cops are good at doing is they're good at covering things up. Now, that could have just been a warning to you, you know, or to your household, to you and your husband,
Yes.
that we can do this at any time that we want to. So I would take those kind of things very seriously, because that's the way those people play. That's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about corruption, and we're talking about the most evil kind of corruption. We're talking about federal, state, and local all working together. This is the deepest form of oppression that a young man can go through and live through and survive. And I can tell you, anybody that's listening out there, I've spoken to Kwadir Felton myself. I have the call recorded. We spoke, you know, from prison. He called me from his prison cell. And Miss Felton was so good to reroute the call through. So we spoke, and I can tell you one thing about Kwadir. He is a very sharp, intelligent young man. Very well spoken, very calm, and given his circumstances and what has happened to him, I think it's pretty amazing that a young man who has his whole life ahead of him, everything I'm talking about, you know, the girlfriend he can have, the baby he can have, the family and the job, the career, he still feels positive about his situation. He feels like things happen for a reason in life, and regardless, he's going to get through this and still be somebody and help people through his circumstances. That's what kind of young man we're talking about.
Yep. Yes.
So
Hello?
I know it's heavy on you, Mrs. Felton. I know, you know, you just doing this show is a lot, you know, because it brings back all the memories of everything that you've been going through anyway, but it just brings them all back even more, you know, fresh in this moment.
Yes. Yes.
Now, I just want to go through a couple more things, because I want folks to understand, again, the depth of this corruption. And we can keep going. We're probably going to end up doing another show another day to go over this a little bit more. But just a couple more things I want people to understand. You know, whenever a family is going through a situation like this, they have all the rights in the world to get the documents from the police department, to get to file those open public request acts, they can get these documents so that they can view them for themselves and see if there was any wrongdoing. That's a right that we have as the public, as the tax-paying public. Mr. and Ms. Felton, you guys have put in several requests for that. Can you tell us a little bit about the requests that you guys have put in and what has happened with those requests as far as the freedom of information?
Yes, I put in for the Oprah for anything pertaining the shooting of Kwadir Felton on January 10th, 2010.
And is that the only thing that you put in? Did you also put in the Oprah for the internal affairs files of Thomas?
Yes, I put in the request for the internal affair records from Thomas McVicar. They said they can't find it. And on anything pertaining to shooting, they said my request is denied because it's still under investigatory. It's still under investigation.
Investigative status, yeah.
Yes.
So pretty much this situation, and I'm going to walk you into this next thing that I'm leading to. You had a lawyer that instead of going in there and literally fighting for Kwadir, she just went through the motions of appearing like she was fighting for Kwadir, but really kind of staying at bay, if you will, and not really, providing any kind of objections during the trial. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the open public request acts were denied on all accounts. During the whole trial, the lawyer never gave a single objection, even when it was proven to be true that, they didn't follow the Attorney General guidelines. With that being said, and with Kwadir being railroaded all the way around, this appeal that's coming up, where do you guys think you stand with this appeal that's coming up? Do you think this is going to be a good, strong stand? You got a lot of great things to go on, especially with the DNA and the weapon and the grouping together of the two incidents that had nothing to do with each other.
Well, actually, the DNA and the fingerprint can't argue that because she never objected to it. So we can't. So the attorney couldn't argue that. So
that won't be a part of the appeals process.
No.
Wow. Now, I wanted to pull that out for a reason. Okay. I want to show people, and this is kind of my purpose of actually doing this conversation and this interview with you is I want to show people something that they don't understand and that many people don't like to talk about. And that's the fact that the system is not just crooked from the federal, state, and local levels as far as law enforcement, but it is also crooked from the lawyer situation. The lawyers work with these people.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that, Ms. Felton? Do you concur with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Go ahead. I just want to know a little bit of your experience with Brooke.
Okay, Brooke, Kwadir had. He had his heart. He just said, "Yeah, Mom, I know she's gonna fight for me." He just had his heart, his soul, everything into this attorney. And me and his father was having like doubts about her because at some point in times we could not get in contact with her. And she actually got upset when Kwadir didn't plead.
Okay.
She actually got upset about that.
What did she do?
Basically, she kicked us. She got up and left out the room and sent one of her employees in there to tell us that she had other clients. So basically, she kicked us out because Kwadir didn't plead.
Wow. And you know that.
And
Go ahead.
Gerard, by Kwadir not taking the plea, believe it or not, if I can get it exact as close as I can, within a day or two, Kwadir had a court date. And before we can get up on the floor, because we had to take the elevator up, as soon as we got off of the elevator, around about 6 men in suits came out of the courtroom that we were supposed to go in, very angry because Kwadir didn't take that plea.
She told him that he was going to jump.
Absolutely. And the reason why he didn't, you know, the reason why he didn't take the plea, one, because we all here know that he didn't do anything wrong. And the reason why they were upset about him not taking the plea is because they couldn't clean up their errors as fast as they wanted to at that time. If he would have took the plea, it would have been easy for them to come out with the same narrative, the same story, and say that they were able to, you know, capture a drug felon that had a gun under this operation. But those guys that were there in the suits, those were probably the federal representatives. And those federal representatives realized that, okay, wait a second. We're walking into a situation where we're going to have to do a lot more work now, and we still have to protect the integrity of this operation. And I believe that's what this is all about, is they protected the integrity of the operation instead of actually going after the criminal in the situation, which is Thomas McVicar.
Right. Absolutely.
Now,
Yep.
also, what I'd like to go over dealing with Brooke here, you know, and again, guys and girls that are listening out there, I'm showing you through this interview how it's not just federal, state, and local. Now, it's also these lawyers. The lawyers themselves are in the bed with the government. We are at a place and a point now where we have to all be like Miss Renee Felton. We have to get to a place where we pick up this legal material and we read it ourselves. We get all the information for ourselves, because these folks that understand the legal system, they're not always in your favor. You know, they will sell you out. They will sell you out in a heartbeat if that means advancing their position as far as what they're doing now, or advancing their economic status. You know, and we see it all the time, and most of the time it's both. It goes hand in hand. So they will sell out somebody in the public so that they can get a bigger office and a little bit more money in their pocket. So actually, I would like you to comment on that, Ms. Felton. What happened to Brooke Barnett after this case? What kind of lawyer was she before this case, and then after this case, what kind of lawyer was she?
Well, when she took Kwadir's case, basically she didn't really have the money, because she never did an investigation. So that's telling me she didn't really have the money for, you know, to really do Kwadir's case. And then once she did the case and Kwadir lost, it's like she moved up to a higher office. She moved up like 4 floors up. So the higher you go up in the building that she's in, the more rent that they pay.
Yeah.
They went on a big vacation to Turkicos. They went, and how I know is because I seen all the pictures on Instagram. They posted all the pictures. She took the whole family on vacation. So you cannot tell me that the state did not pay her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you cannot tell me that she did not get paid, because before Kwadir's trial, Brooke didn't have a lot of money, and I seen it for myself.
And now after the trial, she has a lavish office and and obviously a fatter bank account to go on a very expensive family trip like that.
Yes.
Okay. Now, after the trial, and that just speaks to the corruption that I want our viewers and listeners to understand, that this is what the lawyers are doing to these families. That this is why justice is not happening. They're playing these baseball games behind the scene where they're literally writing these families off because, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Felton can't afford to pay a $50,000, $100,000 check to an attorney, especially after being drained after 2 bail amounts. All right. Now, you know, if the state approaches these attorneys and they say, hey, listen, you're kind of new to the game here, or maybe you've been around for a while, but either way, this is the way things work. And look, you know, we have to get this tied up like this for such and such reasons. And if you mess this up for us, you know, you're going to create a lot of tension around town. It's going to be hard for you to work around the city. And they put that ultimatum on the desk for a lot of these young attorneys and some experienced ones too. And, you know, they let them know, hey, listen, if you don't want it to be too hard, you know, work with us here. We'll make sure it's worth your while, and you know, you're helping us clean up the streets, and your client is just lying anyway, and you know, just work with us to secure this conviction, and you'll go ahead and get everything that's coming to you. And it happens time and time and time again. I just recently covered a story about Jennifer Webb McCrae in Justice for Philip White, my friend Philip White, that was killed in Vineland, New Jersey by the Vineland Police Department. She was just given, the prosecutor was just given the Coretta Scott King Award when 3 people just died on her watch within the last year and no one was ever convicted. So in Philip White's case is still open because they can't figure out how to move forward with it because we controlled the narrative from the beginning. So we keep seeing time and time again where these people, they move up in position. You know, once they do the bidding of the state, of the local government or the federal government, they immediately move up in economic position and also their position in power. Now, unfortunately, this is not the only case of this. Brooke is not the only case. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened to Thomas McVicar, who actually shot Kwadir? What did, you know, obviously he wasn't reprimanded in any kind of way. Did he receive any kind of awards or accolades after this?
Yes, he did. He received an award. And I believe it's for shooting Kwadir.
So so now we have another case of an officer who commits a crime, who gets off of the hook for committing this crime. He didn't follow the Attorney General guidelines, Officer Thomas McVicar. He admits that, but yet he's never reprimanded and he's given an award instead.
He was given an award for shooting Kwadir and for the Operation Wetlands.
For Operation Wetlands.
Yes.
And that is what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay? So the feds, the state government, and the local government were all able to get a victory under this operation, this federal operation, with Thomas McVicar being one of their main frontmen, who actually, who's being hoisted almost as a hero, when he's really someone who has the most corruption, is one of the most corrupt officers in Jersey City, and has a track record of corruption from here to California, and yet he gets an award. The picture that I'm painting is an undeniable picture, and it's showing you that we are in a system that is called an us versus them system. And the people that we have on our side, the lawyers that we've had for so many years on our side that would fight for our rights, we're losing them. We are losing them to the other side because the other side is paying them. They're moving them up in positions. And Dr. King said it best when he talked about the moderates. And, you know, that's one of his biggest stumbling blocks of his life and his walk in activism, is not realizing sooner that, you know, the stumbling blocks to justice and to freedom is the moderate. It's the white moderate, the black moderate, the Latino moderate, anybody that looks to, economic positions of power instead of justice. And that's what we're facing now. We're losing our lawyers because they're looking to their economic positions of power instead of actually getting justice for the people. So now you have the federal government, state government, local government, and the lawyers all working against you. So that's what we're looking at, folks. That's what Kwadir Felton's family is up against. Mr. and Mrs. Felton have been fighting every day since Kwadir has been in there. Hopefully, an appeal will be coming up soon. Is there anything that you could tell us about that?
Well, the state, we're waiting on because Kwadir has his brief in. The attorney put his brief in. Now they're waiting on the state. And come to find out, the state asking for more time before they submit their brief.
Okay, so the briefs are being submitted for the appeal, and now the state is actually asking for more time.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and your attorney has already initiated the process, your new attorney?
Yes.
Okay, absolutely. That's great. Now, let's talk about this old attorney one more time, because I'm sure Brooke Barnett is not making it easy for you and your new attorney. What is she saying about the paperwork from this first trial for Kwadir? I'd like for you to tell our listeners and viewers how she's treating your paperwork that you should rightfully have access to.
Well, after the trial was over, I was asking her for paperwork. She told me, she said, well, you can come into the office and look through the paperwork to see what you want. So I said, fine. So about a week or so, I called her and I asked her, when can I come in to go through the paperwork to get the paperwork that I need? She tells me, oh, I put the paperwork in storage. I said, storage? I said, but why would you do that? And you knew his appeal was coming up. She said, well, I had no room for it in my office. So she said, well, so I called her about a couple of months ago, and now she wants to charge me $175 to go to the storage to get the paperwork and 20 cents a sheet for whatever I need. And she said it will average out to around about $1,000 for what I need. So basically she's telling me she knows what we need, but she's charging, which Kwadir was entitled to this paperwork ever since she was on his case. Yeah,
ever since she was retained. Absolutely. That's his paperwork.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, there's no reason to be charging your client $1,000 for his paperwork. And there's no reason to file away paperwork a week after, it's been initially filed to go put it in storage. So that makes absolutely no sense. And I wanted you to kind of, bring that point out just to, and that's why I'm kind of guiding you through the interview is so people can see step by step. And that's what we're painting here is the picture to show people that this is the breakdown of the system. Federal, state, local, lawyer. This is the breakdown of a complete system. This is how a family is affected by a system that is not in their favor. This is how the us versus them system works because they are the people with the money. We are the people with little money. So where most people, they pay maybe $1,000 or less for their housing each month, $1,000 for some paperwork that should rightfully be yours is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Now, she told you she's going to charge you guys $1,000 for this paperwork, but if I'm not mistaken, she mailed you some paperwork, but before she told you about that $1,000, she had initially made another claim saying that she mailed you everything and that you have it all. Am I correct in that?
Yes. She said that I gave you all that I have.
Wow.
And I broke it down to her, and I told her exactly what she gave me.
So at
And
this point, do you feel like Brooke Barnett is stonewalling the progress that you're trying to make as far as the appeal process?
yes, now after the trial, when Kwadir was found guilty, she made a scene. Oh, we're gonna fight this to the end. It's not over. And she told us that she wanted to work aside the appeal attorney. And the appeal attorney told me he'd been trying to call Brooke to ask Brooke for paperwork too, but she never returned his phone calls.
Yep. And that sounds exactly like the motives of somebody that is stonewalling any further progress, into the case.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
And my intention, what I know was her intentions is the state paid her. They had to tell her, look, you cannot communicate with them anymore. You cannot give them no more paperwork. They just told her what to do, and she had to do what they told her to do. So we
Absolutely.
can't get access to this paperwork that we need.
Absolutely. Now, also another thing I had written down in the notes here, and since we're talking about Brooke Barnett and we're on that part of the corruption of this conversation, let's talk about also, although you and your husband were not able to be in the trial because of the circumstances that you were placed in, you know, you were able to obtain some of the transcripts of the trial. And one of the things I believe that you were telling me about is the prosecutor actually told the lawyer, the attorney Brooke Barnett, that she was going too hard in the trial when she was when the questioning was getting a little bit too heavy, and they weren't comfortable with it.
Yes.
And,
And
and go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, and then when she came back from the sidebar, she just went on a whole different conversation with this with the let's see. She went to a whole different with the witness on the stand. She just reversed everything. And they said that she said, you're going too hard. The prosecutor, you're going too hard on her. You're going too hard on it. So, and that's how I knew that she was on their side. She was working with them. She sold Kwadir out big time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why they also didn't want you guys in the courtroom, because they knew that they were putting on a charade. They knew that this was all they were doing this for show, and that would be able to be easily seen by the family, the immediate family that was in the courtroom, that knew the intricate details of what was going on. So they effectively were able to keep you guys out of the courtroom. And then we're talking about Kwadir is sitting in there, pretty much by himself, and he's blind. So,
Yes.
this is something that I hope that the listeners and viewers out there are getting a true sense of how terrible and tragic this situation really is, about how the system works against you at every turning point. I hear so many people talking about, oh, well, why don't people just do this? Or why don't people just do that? Well, have you ever asked yourself what happens when someone does everything right? And that's what we're talking about. Someone doing everything right. Everything that they were supposed to legitimately be doing in life, they were doing right. Now, I don't want to put this out there as though Kwadir was a saint, although he's never been in trouble with law enforcement or anything like that. He was a regular teenager. So
Right.
did he smoke weed a couple times? Yeah, he probably
Yes.
smoked weed a couple
Yes.
times. Did he drink a couple times? Yeah, he did. I did the same things. I did the same things while I was defending this country. I was underage drinking when I was in the military. We were doing it in the barracks all the time. That's a part of the culture of the military. I don't care if you're 21 or not. So, I was smoking weed too. I'll be honest about mine. So he wasn't doing anything that any other young man doesn't do that goes off to college or to the military or anything like that. But he also wasn't causing any kind of trouble, any kind of violence. He was no major drug dealer. Miss Renee, you told me, said, no, I know he wasn't selling drugs because he was always broke. So,
Sure was.
yeah, we know that Kwadir, didn't, he wasn't a part of that lifestyle, but he had friends in the neighborhood. And when you live in a neighborhood, a lower income neighborhood, guys, you have to understand there's elements within that neighborhood that you can't control what they do. You may grow up with a guy that, in youth group, and a group of guys in youth group or something like that. You hit 15, 16, those guys may start selling weed or something else. So you can't control that, but it doesn't mean that they're still not your friends. So the conspiracy charge they tried to give Kwadir was for phone conversations that he had with his friends, which they were never able to really pinpoint anything, again, because of the single fact that Kwadir wasn't dropping off any drugs or selling any drugs to anyone, and they never, when they raided him, they didn't even bother to look for any drugs.
No.
So, this is a clear-cut case of corruption. That's what we're looking at, corruption, where they've extended the circumstances surrounding Kwadir's life, and they've tried to rip apart anything they could to put him into the narrative of what they wanted to place in the public's mind. And that's what they've semi-effectively done, but they forgot one thing, that the Feltons aren't just going to lay down and take it. They're not just going to sit on the sideline and say, you know what, well, that's just how it goes, and that's how the cookie crumbles. Hey, Kwadir, we'll see you when you get out of there, and good job, state, you win. That's not going to happen.
No.
So, they may have gotten their victory in that moment of time, but now we're working hard to reverse that through the appeals process and also through the court of public opinion. And that's why we're reaching out, through the airwaves to let people know this is what's going on all across the country. Thank God that Kwadir's family is still intact enough to be able to get to the airwaves, to get his incredible story out here, so that people can understand what's going on. Now, we've gone over a lot. We have discussed a lot. I know I've talked quite a bit, but I know I wanted to bring this story to people in the way that we can paint the right picture for them to understand what Kwadir is going through, for lack of better words, through his eyes, through his mind, through his heart. And I hope that we've been able to do that, effectively here today. Now, what I would like to do, I'm actually getting some stuff now, and yes, people, they are listening to us, and yes, all right, wonderful. Okay, so folks are listening, and they are tuned in, and you guys are being heard. I'll let you know that now. This will be archived and put on YouTube as well, so thousands more will be able to hear Kwadir's story and be able to understand it from where he's standing in that jail cell today. Looking over this information and looking over my notes, we've covered a lot. We've covered a lot dealing with the corruption. We've gone over the illegal gun, or the planet gun, I should say, that Thomas McVicar had planted at the scene.
Oh, Sherrod?
Yes.
I meant to tell you, he was charged with 2 guns, right?
Oh, no. If you can, tell us a little bit about that.
He's charged with the gun that he allegedly had to try to rob Tom, the officer. Then he's charged with the gun that they brought to the hospital. They charged him with both guns, Kwadir.
Excuse me. Okay, so they charged Kwadir with both of the weapons.
Yes.
See, and that wouldn't even, it doesn't even make sense how one young man could get charged with 2 weapons. One, he never held, his DNA is on no weapons.
No
So
weapons.
where would, if there's two guns that he's being charged for, where are the two guns then instead of just the one?
Well, the one weapon, the one gun he was charged with was a community gun, which we never seen, was never presented at the trial. And the gun that they allegedly said that he had, that was the only gun that was presented at the trial, along with the 45 that Tom said that he shot Kwadir with.
Okay, so the 45 was presented at the trial that
Yes.
Tom said he used, which would be his service weapon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
now what we also know is if he presented that at the trial, it should have never been allowed to be entered into evidence because of the fact that no use of force report was done.
No
So
use of force, and like I told you before, they never recovered the bullet.
they never recovered the bullet, no use of force report, but he brings it to trial as if it's valid evidence.
Yes.
Which the person there was saying that, they still to this day, no one knows what Kwadir was actually shot with.
No. We still don't know now today what type of gun he was shot with.
Okay. So, he's being charged for the community gun. He's also being charged now. The gun that is it also possible that the gun that Thomas McVicar actually shot Kwadir with is a gun that he actually planted on him, since Kwadir is being charged for the community gun anyway. They could have very easily have brought that gun, the community gun, back to the scene. But what they could have also done, because Thomas McVicar was in a personal vehicle, it's not even documented that he was working that night that he shot Kwadir. So with a personal vehicle, he's not on any official duty. Is it possible that the gun that was placed beside Kwadir could have been the gun that Kwadir was actually shot with?
I believe so, because it was a 9 millimeter, and the holes, the holes in Quadia's head, the gunshot wounds are really small. They are really small because he keeps saying he shot Kwadir with a 45, but a 45 is a very big gun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A 45, and let's be clear on the ammunition too, a 45 with hollow tips.
Tips, correct.
So,
He said,
yeah, go ahead.
he said he shot Kwadir with his 45 with hollow tip bullets.
Wow.
And the pathologist, she was on the stand, and she said that, and he said he shot Kwadir through the glass. But when they checked his clothing, they checked everything, and there was no kind of glass fragments in his face, in his hands, and there was no glass fragments nowhere on Kwadir's body. Nowhere. So they said there's no way that he was shot through a glass.
Okay. So it sounds like he's saying conflicting things. Did he shoot him from the inside of the car or from outside?
From the inside. He was in the inside.
Oh, okay. And he's saying that he was facing Kwadir. Okay, so, all right. So what he's saying is he pretty much shot Kwadir face to face as he was facing him from the inside of the car.
Right. Correct.
And in actuality, that's not what happened, because he shot him on the side of his head and it went out the other side.
Right. Right.
Absolutely. I'm glad that we painted a clear picture of that too. So we just know that Thomas McVicar is lying all the way around, that more than likely that the gun that Kwadir was shot with is actually the gun that Thomas McVicar was personally holding that night, and that's why they can't find any kind of any fingerprints on it. And another reason why I had brought up that point is because the weapon that was found, quote unquote, found at the location of where Kwadir's body was, there was no fingerprints brought up on it. So that tells you something. It also lets you know that it's probably not the guys from the car. That weapon, that was probably the community weapon, and it tells you that whatever fingerprints were on that weapon were wiped off, and they were probably Thomas McVicar's fingerprints, which would be the reason why no fingerprints were found on the weapon. And it would also show why Kwadir's fingerprints weren't there, and also no blood DNA of any kind was found on the weapon.
Correct. Yep.
All right. So one other thing that I'd like to cover before we go ahead and close out this interview with you guys, and I thank you for being so gracious with the All Rights Matter show and Anon Radio Live and bringing us, the depth of this story. But one other thing I'd like to close out with is Brooke Barnett actually made a terrible error during the trial. And one of the biggest errors that she made, is that was beyond not getting the use of force report or demanding the use of force report, was the fact that Kwadir had doctor's notes that he should not have been testifying at the trial, and she chose to disregard those. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, he had got I had got a doctor's note from his doctor. He specifically said that he do not think that Kwadir should get on the stand and testify. He said because he have known Kwadir for quite a while, and he knows how, since he's been shot in the head, how he gets very angry very fast. Mm-hmm. And he specifically wrote it and wrote to Brooke that he believed, as his doctor, that he should not get on the stand to testify. And she just totally ignored the letter and put him on the stand.
Okay, so that drives home the point even more, guys and girls that are out there listening and viewing this. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about lawyers working for the local governments, the state governments, and the federal government. They're on that team. We're talking about being railroaded. We're talking about them even ignoring the doctor's orders. So when this thing comes up for an appeal, there's going to be a few things that are going to have to be looked at here. And one of the major things that this should come up on appeal for is the incompetence of the representation. The representation, Brooke was completely incompetent in representing Kwadir in a trial that is going to affect his whole life. His life has already been affected. So if the doctor is telling them that, hey, this man has just suffered major trauma and that this is not a good idea, I am giving you my professional opinion not to do this, what would give her the right to say that this is okay to put him on a stand where he has no moral support in the courtroom and to allow him to, completely walk into the lion's den, completely disregarding the doctor's orders?
Yes. Yeah, and he did not want to go on the stand, but she kept pressuring him. She kept pressuring him because he did not want to go, but she kept pressuring
That's
him.
the opposite of normally what happens in a trial. Normally in a trial, especially a trial where the evidence is so clear-cut, as we've gone over for this last couple hours, so clear-cut that that law enforcement was wrong in this situation. And, most of the time, the attorney is going to try to keep that person off of the stand so that so that the jury can get a look at all of the evidence. Mm-hmm. And if she's trying to pressure him on the stand against the doctor's wishes, that says a lot about what side she was working on and about her level of competence in dealing with Kwadir's case. And she should have never have had the opportunity to represent a fine young man like Kwadir, because she did exactly what cheap attorneys like her do. She sold him out for a bigger buck and for a better payday and for a more secure future for her and her family, while she left the pieces on the floor for Kwadir's family.
Yep. Yes, she did.
So I just want to let you know that, you have our support here, the All Rights Matter show and Anon Radio Live. We're We're going to be following this, and like I said, we're going to bring you back on again when we have some more updates and developments along the way. I appreciate you guys coming on. I believe Mr. and Mrs. Felton, and I'm not sure, is your daughter there too on speakerphone?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And what's her name?
Latreya.
I didn't want to say it wrong. I hate when people say my name wrong. So, Latreya, thank you for joining us as well. It's great to have the whole family, or most of the family on the phone right now. Our prayers go out to the whole family, and also to Kwadir's brother who's serving in the military for our country. You guys are a fine, upstanding family, and we stand with you in solidarity in your fight for justice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no problem, guys. Hey, listen, is there anything else, before we go ahead and close out this interview, is there anything else that you guys want to get out there or say to the public on behalf of Kwadir or yourselves?
Sure. Due to the topic of the issues that we discussed with you, Sherrod, and you discussed with us and the viewers out there, just in case there is any curious minds wanting to know information that wasn't said, we live in an African American community, and on just about every corner there is CT cameras. And the night that Kwadir got shot, they claimed that they do not have no footage. So we stayed on the lawyer on and off about that situation. Mind you, there are cameras on both ends of the block that Kwadir got shot, and there were cameras on a house. Due to the fact that when we stayed on the lawyer about the situation about the CT cameras, her first words to us were, I had a chance to view some of the footage that they showed me, and it was too dark. So we kept staying on her. Her next answer was, she seen Thomas McVicar in the middle of the street spinning around with his hands on his head like, oh my God. So therefore, due to the fact of the trial, the CT cameras footage was never presented in the trial, and what officer is going to go, which they claim was a high crime area, under surveillance with no CT camera footage, where if he felt that his life was at danger with Kwadir Felton, after who he was viewing under surveillance had left, he radioed in, let them know which direction they went when they got to the corner, and told the surveillance team, he claims, that he was holding down his position because he didn't want to blow his cover. So, by him staying in the area, the next thing you know, he shoots Kwadir. The viewers should know that.
Well, I thank you for that, Mr. Felton. Wow. So there is absolutely 100%, evidence, video evidence of McVicar shooting Kwadir. And to this day, have you guys seen any of that footage?
No.
No, but one thing that Brooks' private eye that she had investigating on things, there is a precinct 4 blocks away. And when you walk into that precinct, there is nothing but big CT cameras
CCTV
on of all that whole Greenville area.
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much what you're saying is they have the CCTV cameras that at every corner, they're the whole area, all those blocks are monitored from both sides pretty much, and it would be impossible for them to not have footage, especially since the lawyer is saying that she viewed some of the footage.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you adding that in, Mr. Felton, because that hits home what we've been saying this whole interview here all along, is that this is one massive cover-up. And by you guys stepping forward and bringing that information forward, you're not only exposing the corruption of one officer, but you're exposing the corruption of a completely corrupt system. I'm talking about from that one officer to the police department, to the local government levels, to the state government levels, to the FBI, to the attorney. All of them. So you're taking a very strong stance. And the last time that I've seen it, such a well put together African American family taking such a strong stance like that. I've seen it a lot, actually, especially in recent events, given a lot of things that happened last year with law enforcement. But another situation is Private Lavina Johnson. And guys and girls, you guys can look that up and go to my YouTube channel for more information about that. But in that situation, the same thing. You can see that the family structure was a good family structure, and that the child came from a great home, and that the fight is a legitimate, righteous fight. And these types of fights are the fights that we cannot ignore. We have Black Lives Matter and the other organizations that are out there that are fighting for the people that have lost their lives. But what about the people that are still alive and that have experienced injustices and they're incarcerated? In Kwadir Felton's situation, this is an extreme situation. I'm talking extreme. If you've been listening with us for the last couple hours, then you know that if you have children, or if you're a young person yourself, that if these circumstances happen to your children or to you, that this is almost unbearable. Almost unbearable. So, we have to go forward now, and now we have to really we have to uplift the people that are out there that are literally in these environments where they're being terrorized. Their loved ones are still alive and incarcerated, but yet they have no voice. We have to get out of that. We have to give these mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters a voice so that we can help them in their struggle, help them in their battle. That's what All Rights Matter is about, is because our collective rights all matter, and that's what's being assassinated. Not just our lives, but our rights. Yes. So I thank you guys again, and thank you, Mr. Felton, for adding that there to the end for the cameras and letting us know about that. That's definitely something else we can add to this terrible, tragic situation, which these folks were completely in the wrong, and they've done everything in their power to cover it up. But God is good, and you guys are sitting here with me tonight, and we're talking on air, and it doesn't matter what they've tried to do. You guys have, stood very strong, and you've made sure that they're not gonna, you're not gonna let it go down like that. So I thank you guys. I really do thank you for bringing this tremendous story here to the All Rights Matter show. Like, this is I don't even really know what to say about it. You guys know how I feel about Kwadir. You know how I feel about you guys. So I just hope that all of our viewers and listeners can feel the depth of compassion that I feel for your circumstances and situation, and really reach out. So I'm going to leave some links below this video, guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, the links are going to be some links to help out the Felton family. We're going to try to do some things here at the All Rights Matter show that helps them out a little bit more. I'll be discussing that with them off air. But it's important now that we show support and we get Kwadir out of there. He doesn't need to be in there. He's living, he's right now, he's serving time in a living hell, a hell here on earth for a good man that has never done anything wrong to hurt or harm anybody. And, we'll talk about this more the next time, but they're trying to have his sentences served consecutively, meaning that out of the 16 years that he's sentenced to, he would have to do 11 of them. And this is a man that has never hurt a hair on anybody's head, and he was only doing the right thing by standing up for himself, and he was railroaded by a completely corrupt system. So we can't let Kwadir spend 11 years behind bars as a blind man for the crimes that they've committed to alter this man's life forever. We have to stand up. We have to talk about this. We have to spread this. We have to share this message. We have to. It's our duty. So is there anything else that you guys would like to add to this before I go ahead and close this out?
Well, no, I just want to thank you so much, Sharad, for having us. And we sure appreciate this very much. And I want to thank you so much for having us.
Not a problem at all, Mr. and Mrs. Felton. Anytime you guys want to come on the show and speak, you have an open pass, an open invitation anytime. Our hearts and our ears are always here for you. So I want you to know that. And listen, we'll be praying for your other children as well, that they're safe and comfortable throughout their lives, and that you guys just would have the blessing of God over your whole family, so that this tragedy doesn't happen again. And on top of that, we talked, Ms. Felton, and we know that Kwadir's story coming out of this is going to be a very, very powerful story.
Yeah.
So everything happens for a reason, and like I said, guys, Kwadir's spirits have been high. He understands what's going on, all of this. And he also understands the importance of his testimony. So we want to go ahead and keep him encouraged. Like I said, I'm going to drop some links, and we're going to do some more things for this case to make sure that that we the people take the narrative back from this corrupt, this crooked governments and law enforcement agencies. We have to take the narrative back, and this is the first step in doing so. So thank you, guys. Appreciate you coming on. Our prayers are with you, and we'll be following up with you at a later date to make sure that everything is working in a positive way. And again, anybody that's listening to this show out there on YouTube or Anon Radio Live, go to the description section below the video and make sure you download our app. Go ahead and get the app on your phone. Whenever we go live on the air with important breaking interviews like this, you can be updated immediately that we're going on live, so that you can be the first to catch the information. So download that app to support us. It's free. It only takes about 2 minutes of your time to install. So thank you guys once again, and we'll make sure that we keep you in our prayers, and we'll be following up with you.
Okay, thank you
very much.
All right, now have a good night.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.